Assalamu alaikum. In the name of Allah, who came in the person of Master Farad Muhammad, a man, in the name of the most honorable Elijah Muhammad, now the exalted Christ, and in the name of the best student of the honorable Elijah Muhammad, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, I'd like to greet you in the greetings of peace. Assalamu alaikum. Well, family, I wear many hats, as many of us do. I'm the student minister of agriculture and the farm manager, and we have 9 ministries in the Nation of Islam, but we have a 10th overriding ministry that all of us have to be a part of. That's the spiritual ministry. Because without the spiritual ministry, which is the understanding in terms of where we fit at with God, with man, and with time, and what must be done, we all must understand that. And then we get into our specific disciplines in terms of what is our mission within the mission. So my mission within the mission is agriculture and farming and food, but to keep me going and so I can fulfill our other mission, which is the resurrection of our people, we must understand the spiritual, the scriptural, and know what time it is and what we must do. So today I'm going to deal on something that's very, very intellectual in terms of thinking. We're in a serious play. We are taught that history is written 25,000 years in advance, and we are now going past through the 15,000th year, and there's a judgment. We're in the judgment, and there's 6,000 years. Those are the rule of the made devil, the white man. And now we're at the end of the time. So, my question is this. What would you do if you were a made devil and you found out that you only got 6,000 years? What would you do? Would you just sit there and wait until your time was up and just give up and say, okay, well, 6,000 years is up, I give up? Or would you, because you are the devil, you are Satan, you are against God, and you don't believe that God is a spook. You got us believing that, but you don't. So what would you do? Well, you would figure out a way to trick your way past that time. You would figure out a way to keep those who the promise was promised to blind. You would figure out a way to get in the straight path, the Sirata Mustaqim, to lead the righteous away from their destiny. So this is what I'm going to talk about today. It's the game that the Jews, the so-called Jews, are playing, and the time that we're in, and so we can understand that this is a heavy thing. But our God, who came in the person of Master Farad Muhammad, is the master of this day of judgment. So let's get started. Okay? As you know, I like to have a lot of written stuff. So the title is The Promise, the Plan, and the Master Plan. And we go from Surah 3, verse 54 of the Holy Quran, and it states, and the Jews planned, and Allah also planned, and Allah is the best of planners. So here, specifically, the Holy Quran points out the Jews, and that they planned, and Allah also planned. But Allah is the best of planners. So, we know that the Jews claim to be God's chosen people. How did they get in that position? Are they truly the rightful owners of that position? And that entails a promise that, and I have my book here, Commonomics 2, the sheepdog, and the evil shepherd, because most of these slides that I'm going to produce for you, the information, is in my book. The first half of my book is dealing with the histories of the Jews, how they stole our history. As the Minister Farrakhan said, walking around in our clothes. So many of what you see in this presentation, you can get in the book, and you will find the references in the book to the places where I found this information. Okay. So, God must fulfill his promise. And that promise is, the black man and woman have been enslaved and afflicted in a strange land, America, for over 400 years. For God to fulfill his promise, he must come in person to judge America with his destructive power, and he must separate his people from the made enemy of the black man. Now, the most honorable Elijah Muhammad taught us that the so-called Jews are not God's chosen people and have not received the promise given by God to Abraham in Genesis 15, 13, and 14, namely, and he said unto Abram, know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. And also, that nation whom they shall serve will I judge, and afterward shall they come out with great substance. In fact, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, in his monumental book, Message of the Black Man, taught that America has fulfilled this to the very letter and spirit with her slaves, the so-called Negroes, under the type of Israel. The Egyptians did nothing of the kind to Israel when they were in bondage to them. In fact, and as God taught me, the Bible is not referring to those people as his people, it is referring to the so-called Negro and his enemy, the white race. Now, we go to our teachings. Lost Found Lessons number 1. Question number 1. Why did Musa have a hard time to civilize the devil 2000 BC? Now this is important. Musa, that's Moses, 2000 BC. And he hard time to civilize the devil. Not to come and get them out of Egypt, but in fact to go up into the Caucasus Mountains and get them out and civilize them 2000 BC, not 1500 BC. 1500 BC is when the Jews claimed that they were taken by Musa out of Egypt into the Promised Land. 1500 BC. But we say Musa was there, really the real Musa was there 500 years before that, and he went up and he civilized the people who call themselves Jews today when they were in the caves. And they were in the caves for 2,000 years, and in 2000 BC, Musa went up there and brought them out. Therefore, that whole story about the Egyptians enslaving the children of Israel is a made-up story, or put it like this, it's been taken out of time and place, and we'll get to that in a minute. But 1500 BC, or 3,500 years ago, Moses did not take the children of Israel, the Jews, the so-called Jews, out of Egypt and take them to the Promised Land. Okay? Now, since 1975, the results of archaeological findings in Palestine have proven that the Exodus, as described in the Bible, never happened. The so-called children of Israel were never settled by God in the quote-unquote Promised Land, and therefore God's promise to Abraham was not fulfilled 3,500 years ago and must be fulfilled now, according to Minister Farrakhan in part 23 of The Time and What Must Be Done. Discussion of these archaeological findings can be found in books published by Israeli scholars such as Shlomo Sand in The Inventions of the Jewish People, The Invention of the Jewish People, and in articles published in The Final Call, including Did the Exodus Ever Happen? Now, add to this that white people who call themselves Jews are not even from the seed of Abraham, but are from a tribe of white Russians who converted to Judaism in 740 AD. Now we have a formula for the complete dismissal of the Jewish claims to God's promise. Now, the poison book, that's the Bible. This is from what the Muslims believe. We believe in the truth of the Bible, but we believe that it has been tampered with and must be reinterpreted so that mankind will not be snared by the falsehoods that have been added to it. So, We say that the Poison Book of Bible is the mental snare of black people's mind and soul. Now, the story of the Exodus that the researchers have found never happened, and how they found this out, they show you how Allah works. There was a 1967 6 Days War that Israelis beat the Arabs. Now what happened, Egypt and the Arabs, now what happened, it opened up Arab land for Israeli archaeologists bent on providing the historical accuracy of the Bible stories, in particular the Exodus. When leading scholars such as Israel Finkelstein, that's his name, Israel Finkelstein, so you know he's Jewish, and Neil Asher Silverman, so you know he's Jewish, review the archaeological evidence which they published in their 2002 book, The Bible Unearthed. And they concluded that the wanderings of the patriarchs, the Exodus from Egypt, Joshua's conquest of Canaan, and David and Solomon's vast kingdom was not backed up by the archaeological evidence. So, what this is saying is that in 1967, the Israelis were able to get some new occupied land. This occupied land that they occupied were pieces of, where supposedly pieces of the Exodus story happened, in particular like Jericho. You know, Joshua blew the horns and Jericho fell down. Well, there was no Jericho. According to these researchers, there was no Jericho 1500 BC. Therefore, there could have been no Joshua blowing the horns. They also found that there was no artifacts in the deserts, in the Sinai, which now the war opened up for the Israelis to go and to dig in. They found in the Sinai there was no evidence whatsoever of hundreds of thousands of people wandering around for 40 years, because you would have a lot of trash, you would have a lot of pots, pottery, clay pots broken. You would have at least you would have a lot of evidence of that many people wandering around for 40 years. But there's not one shred of evidence that that happened, because it did not happen at that time in that area, talking about 1500 years ago. Now, there's a book called The Book of the Beginning by Gerald Massey. See, the white man does a lot of study that really bears witness to what the Honorable Elijah Muhammad is teaching us, and bears witness to the technology of the Jews, of how they have transformed what was on the Egyptian walls into stories in the book, taken out of place and out of time. Okay, we'll get into that more in a minute. Ezra is credited with founding the Great Synagogue, or Men of the Assembly, which succeeded in establishing the regular reading of the sacred records and the rewriting of the law after the books had been burnt. For thy law is burnt, therefore no man knoweth the things that are done of thee, or the works that shall begin. This is 2nd Ezra 14 and 21. So what this is saying is that Ezra rewrote the books, the law that was burnt. In other words, they don't have a book. Ezra rewrote the book. Now, who burnt the book? Let's get down to the histories in a minute. But I want to show you how even the Bible itself tells on itself. John Elijah Muhammad said they have added to and taken away. Here's Jeremiah 8:8, the New International Version. Now I'm going to get the King James Version in a minute. You know, most black folks got King James Version. But the New International Version says, how can you say, quote, we are wise, for we have the law of the Lord, when actually the lying pen of the scribes has handled it falsely. Well, this is clear here that the scribes, the lying pen of the scribes has handled it falsely. So how can you say we are wise, for we have the law of the Lord, when it actually the lying pen of the scribes has handled it falsely? That's clear that the book that they have now, that's supposedly the law, the Torah, was made up by a lying scribe. Now, look at King James Version. Now, these people, let me show you, these people are slick. These lawyers. You know what I mean? The Jews, most, Jews, that's lawyers. You know what I mean? Bankers and lawyers. All right. How do ye say, we are wise, and the law of the Lord is with us? Lo, certainly in vain made he it. The pen of the scribes is in vain. What the hell is that? Let's try to read that. Lo, certainly in vain made he it. The pen of the scribes is in vain. What the hell is that? See, that's that gobbledygook. That's that lawyery stuff. Here's the plain description, when actually the lying pen of the scribes has handled it falsely. Not lo, certainly in vain made he it. The pen of the scribes is in vain. What the hell is that? See, this is the gobbledygook. And if we go to court, have to get these damn Jews to be our lawyers and wind up like Bill Cosby and convicted of crimes that we didn't do because we didn't understand how to deal with them words, and our lawyers fooled us, tricked us, and get us in jail, and they supposed to be on our side. Okay, now let's get down to some nitty-gritty, time and place. Okay, this is in Appendix C of my book, The Sheepdog, Evil Shepherd, locking down what happened and when. 605 BC, Nebuchadnezzar reign began. Nebuchadnezzar defeats Necho, and Daniel is captured. Daniel, book of Daniel, Daniel Lion's Den, he was captured. 605 BC. 597 BC, Jerusalem attacked by Nebuchadnezzar and first deportation. 586 BC, Jerusalem destroyed and second deportation. So Jerusalem was destroyed once, attacked, first deportation, then again 586, second deportation. And in that time period is when they took Daniel and took him back to Babylon. Now, 568 BC, Nebuchadnezzar enters Egypt and builds Fort Babylon. I'm going to show you this in a minute. And it was a massive African deportation. Hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of black people were taken from Egypt and put in Babylon. And they were carted through Fort Babylon. Okay? This is a occupation. 556 BC. Nebuchadnezzar's reign ends and Belshazzar's reign, or Nabonidus reign began. Okay. I'm sorry, I can't say it in words. Okay, Fort Babylon. If you go on a map, right now, there's an area in Cairo, Egypt, called Fort Babylon. I mean, not Fort Babylon, but Babylon. Now, I was wondering, why would Babylon be a section of Cairo in Egypt? Well, actually, there's a fort there. This is a rendition of that fort. It was huge. And it was right across from the pyramids. Here's old Cairo. And here's the places, the churches there now, that's been placed over this large fort. This is the Fort Babylon here. Here's the Nile River. Here's a canal. Okay, now you look at the scale. You see that's 100 meters? So this thing was 400 meters. That's a quarter of a mile this way, and a half mile this way. I mean eighth of a mile this way. Quarter of a mile this way, eighth of a mile. Huge. It can house thousands and thousands of people, of soldiers in these barracks. And this is a canal. This canal here was dug, and a canal went from Cairo, or Memphis. That's the old name of Cairo is Memphis. There was a canal dug so that they can go in and out, go to the canal, then go to the Red Sea and get over here back to the Persian Gulf into Babylon. All right, so they didn't have to go all the way around this way to get there. Okay, they can go here, and they had also the Babylonians, the Persians, had also conquered parts of Arabia, so they had forts along here too, supply depots, so they could get out and instead of going across all these deserts, they had a canal, and that canal ran right up to the Nile, and this is what protected the canal. Okay, as they took people and goods and books and scrolls out into Babylon, this was the fort that allowed that process of stealing to happen. Now, let's timeline continues. 539 BC, Cyrus' reign begins. first returnees to Jerusalem. Cyrus' reign ends, Daniel dies, and Cambyses' reign begins. 525 BC, Cambyses destroys all Egyptian temples except Jewish temple at Elephantine. Cambyses' reign ends and Darius' reign begins. 519 BC, Darius authorizes the building of a Jewish temple in Jerusalem. Okay? But there's a temple already in Elephantine, 525 BC. That's in Egypt. Jewish temple. But now there's a Jewish temple now. Darius authorized the building of a Jewish temple in Jerusalem in 519 BC. But guess what? They didn't get a book until 458 BC. Ezra writes the Pentateuch, the 5 books of and Judaism was born. The 5 books of Moses were written by Ezra in 458 BC. But Darius builds a Jewish temple in 519 BC. Then in 518 BC, coming on closer to modern time, Darius orders the codification of Egyptian laws. And it was completed, the codification was completed in 502 BC. So what does that mean, codification? What that means is that in Egypt, Darius ordered Ariades to set up a commission to collect and codify laws. And within 16 years, they were codified on papyrus and published in Egyptian, Demotic, and Aramaic. In other words, they read everything off of our temples. We have 42 temples. This is the temple of Amun-Ra the Karnak, the largest one. Look how huge this thing is. Okay? All right? Here are people. See, here are people right here, right? Replication. See people? Look how huge this thing is. And around each one of those pillars were stories. All the faces that had the stories. And this is just one of the temples. So look at all. This is a piece of it over here too. So all this stuff they had to take. They had to write down. They had to write down everything and translate it into Egyptian, Demotic, and Aramaic, because this stuff was in the hieroglyphs on here, Egyptian hieroglyphs. So they had to translate it. Okay, that's the writing on the wall that Belshazzar couldn't read, and they had David. Go back up here. Daniel. Okay, to read for them. Right? They couldn't read it, so they had Daniel or our scribes, wasn't just one Daniel, but our priests were forced to translate this and to codify it or to put it into law books. And this was the law. Okay, it wasn't just 10 commandments, but this was the history. By law, they mean the histories that to justify who is legit. Who is legit? Okay. Now, so let's go back over this. Ezra writes the new Torah. The Torah, a Pentateuch, was burnt when Jerusalem was destroyed by Babylonians. This is what they say. But Darius a follower of Zoroaster, brought Ezra to Babylon. And according to Gerald Massey, the work of Ezra was that of translating the law from the hieroglyphical or Hebrew writing into Chaldee of Asheroth, or the square letter. In other words, what we have here is somebody stealing what was written on our walls in hieroglyphs, translated them from one language to another, and Ezra supposedly dictated the translation during 40 days and nights, and the 5 scribes wrote down what they were told by him, which they knew not, as they did not understand the original characters. Talking about the hieroglyphs. So what we have here is a major theft of our writings, okay, off of our walls. And to show you, you see this right here in front of St. Peter's obelisk? That's an obelisk in front of St. Peter's Cathedral. That's an obelisk. They stole that from in front of one of the Egyptian temples. You see here you got an obelisk, but there was 2 here. This is in front of Temple Luxor. There were 2 here. One on this pedestal that's there, and one here on this pedestal. It's gone. What they do is they stole us, they done stole our identity, then they go take it and put a cross on top of it, scratch all the writings, hieroglyphs off, and sit there as a monument to them conquering us, because we are the chosen people. And they are waiting on the Messiah, not to follow him, but to kill him. So, we have now in 1972, the FBI secret files on Black America. Division 5 also worked to prevent the rise of a Messiah, not Black Messiah. It didn't say Black Messiah, it said Messiah. Someone who could unify and electrify the militant Black nationalist movement. Malcolm X had been the most likely candidate, but his assassination removed that threat. Malcolm was simply the martyr of the movement today. Muhammad was hardly a more viable threat, they're talking about Elijah Muhammad, because of his age. In the final analysis, Division 5 said Carmichael, that's Stokely Carmichael, and King, Martin Luther King, were the only serious candidates. And of course, they ran Carmichael out of the country. They killed King. So, from 1960 to 72, they were looking for a Messiah. Why were they looking for a Messiah between 1960 and 1972? You see, they didn't have to say Black Messiah because they know that Jesus was black, God's people was black, and those who are going to redeem them are going to be black, so they didn't have to say Black Messiah. But what were they looking for between 1960 and 1972? Now, remember the 400 years? When does it start? 400 years starting when? Well, we say 50-55, John Hawkins bringing black people to America, according to Master Farad Muhammad. So black folks were brought here in 50-55. Okay? But according to the documentation on the internet, the British archives record John Hawkins visiting North America in 1563, not 1555. Well, you see, here is where the problem comes, and how when you steal somebody's stuff, be careful. In 1955, God gives Minister Farrakhan as a gift to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. That's 1955. Okay? But 1963, Kennedy was killed. 63, Malcolm leads the messenger. 65, Malcolm was assassinated. 68, Martin Luther King was assassinated. 1969, Stokely Carmichael was run out of America. Why? Because the white people thought that 1963 was the end of the 400 years. They didn't know about the 1555. Master Farad Muhammad gave us that information. His information said that John Hawkins came to America in 1563. So he was looking for the Messiah in the 1960s. He knew there was a time for the separation, so he killed Kennedy, he killed Malcolm, okay? He killed King, and he ran Stokely Carmichael out the country. So, Holy Quran, Surah 354, and the Jews plan, and Allah also planned, and Allah is the best of planners. So, I'm saying all this to say that here you have prophecy that the real children of Israel, the tribe of Shabazz, had in the promised land, in the Nile Valley, on our walls. And then the usurper came in and found out what those things meant by getting some of us to force us to translate it. He then took it and restructured it into a time frame and a place where he could be the winner. He could be God's chosen people. He can be the people of the Messiah, the so-called Jews. Then when you say, well, wait a minute, brother, are you telling me, wait a minute, but the Quran also says that the Egyptians enslaved the children of Israel, and then Moses, came 3,500 years ago, 1500 BC, just like the Jews say in the Bible. What do you say about that? Well, I say to you, I have a Quran. Okay, I have a Quran, Holy Quran. Okay, you have a Holy Quran, right? I want you to look in the Holy Quran. Don't read the commentary from the so-called scholars, Arab scholars. Don't read the commentary. And you tell me, when did Moses of the Holy Quran bring the children of Israel out from underneath Pharaoh? Number two, what was the name of Pharaoh? Pharaoh is a title. Pharaoh is not a name. It's a title, and these are the titles that people had when they came into from outside of Egypt and took over Egypt. They called themselves Pharaoh. Now, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad has taught us there was a Pharaoh. but he was an Arab. Okay, and he did take some of the white folks from Saudi Arabia into Egypt, but that was not the exodus from Egypt. But you have somebody named Pharaoh. Now we know that after Musa went up and brought the white folks up into civilization, then white folks came out and mixed with the indigenous people, producing half-breeds like Colin Kaepernick is now. Nebuchadnezzar, Darius, Cyrus, I got pictures of them, look just like Colin Kaepernick. These are the half-breeds, half-originals, who they used to build an army to come in and to take over us. They call them the Hyksos. Historians call it the Hyksos, or the Shepherd King. They came from the desert, from the east, came into Lower Egypt and took it over for over 200 years. And then we ran them out. Kamoses and Kamoses and Ramoses, well, not Ramesses later had to run them out again. This is way after that time period. That's a whole nother story about Ramesses. But there were two brothers who fought and ran out the Hyksos. All right. Now, these Hyksos came in and enslaved us. And in fact, in the Bible itself, it tells you that these outsiders, Joseph, came from the outside and hooked up with somebody called Pharaoh, and then bought the Egyptians, bought the land and the people and gave them to Pharaoh. Well, you don't need to buy the people on the land if you're the king. So this Pharaoh was not an indigenous king. He's a usurper. He's a conqueror. He's an infiltrator. He's a usurper. So they have taken our place. So you say, well, what happened then, brother? If the Quran said that this happened, are you calling the Quran a lie? No. But the Quran has histories far beyond the 6,000 years of the white man. Would you agree? Or would you say the Quran only deals with the 6,000 years of the white man? No. You know better than that. We know in our history that we have history written in advance for 25,000 year cycles. We also know that the tribe of Shabazz left from the Holy Land, from Mecca, and went into the jungles of Africa 50,000 years ago. So the period, you got 50,000 year period. Anywhere in that could have been a Moses and an Exodus. Take this and put it in your head and think about it. They have found there's a story about a prince who blew up a mountain, get your map, between Yemen and present-day Djibouti, the straits that keep between the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean, the Red Sea and Indian Ocean. And it used to be a valley where the Red Sea is now. Okay? But then something happened. The people say that a prince blew the mountain up that protected the valley from the ocean, and then the Indian Ocean flooded and wiped out that civilization. Could that have been Moses? Now remember, there's a story. Well, this is not a story. I talk about it in my book, the first book, I Will Not Apologize. The Nile River was made by us. 4,000 mile river was not natural. It was made, bringing water from Lake Tana and from Lake Victoria, coming together at Khartoum, and that it travels through 70 cataracts. These cataracts are just cuts through granite, 7 times, 7 different cuts. And a geologist named Windorf went and did research on the soil in the Nile Valley, because before they put up the Aswan Dam, where they had to do the archaeological work and the geological work, because once the dam was there, it would be covered up forever. And he found that the Nile Valley below Elephantine was covered by seawater up to 25,000 years ago. from the Mediterranean Sea. Then something happened, and those mountains were cut through, and the water from Lake Tana in Ethiopia and Lake Victoria down there in Kenya, those two waters were able to rush through those cataracts and then push out the seawater and bring in the soil from Ethiopia as it cut through the mountains, the Blue Nile. Cut through the mountains, that soil was deposited in the Nile Valley below Elephantine. Now, that was 25,000 years ago. Could that have been Moses doing that? With that stick he had? With the ark? With that power? Destroying mountains to allow a river to go through? So in fact, to build the promised land for the promised children who were enslaved by their brothers in Arabia? Suppose there was a drought and we had to leave before 25,000 years ago, leave and go back to Arabia. And then our own brothers enslaved us there. And then Moses came 25,000 years ago, brought us out of that with his power, with God's power, tore through the mountains and made a river and had that river to push the seawater out of the Nile Valley. And that's that Jordan. That's that great river, the Nile, not the Jordan, but the Nile. That's the promised land. Okay, we're working on all of that, but suffice this to say, there's no dates in the Holy Quran. There's no dates in the Holy Quran. And the Holy Quran does not tell you that the white man is the devil that was made 6,000 years ago. The Quran doesn't tell you that specifically. Because if that knowledge was here, then the Arabs would not have participated with the white man to bring us over here. Because they were known that the white man was the devil. They didn't know he was the devil. They thought devil was Shaitan, he's a mystery, he's a spook, a spirit. They didn't know that the white man was the devil. And the Holy Quran does not point that out specifically. Because that secret had to be held until the devil has done his work. But now Master Fard Muhammad came to us and gave us that beautiful piece of revelation. The white man is the devil. All praises due to Allah. And now it's time, family, to get behind the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. Let's build a heaven for ourselves on earth, because God did come for us and made himself known in 1930. Master Fard Muhammad, and he's calling on us to separate, to come out of her and to come with him so we can build a heaven on earth. And don't worry about the damn white man. He got a plane, had that before he came. All we have to do is separate and let the cracker come, let the monsters come, let them fly their jets, their planes, their rocket ships. We got something for that. And they know that. They even telling you now, UFOs. You know, UFO, they know exactly who it is and what it is, but they want to keep you, black man and woman, hanging on to them as human shields to protect them from your God, Master Fard Muhammad, and now the Honorable Elijah Muhammad on the wheels. Yeah, Florence, that hurricane that terrified you, that I could see, came in fast into Carolina, stopped, half on land, half on water, and just slowed up and scraped all your wealth. Just scraped it down the coast. All praise is due to Allah. Scraped you and now flooding you out. That's Elijah Muhammad on the wheel. Assalamu alaikum, family.